Will you have to pay for Apple Intelligence? We thought this might happen.
Hello and welcome to the All Future Podcast. We're here multiple times a week talking about tech that you might have to pay for, including Apple Intelligence. So here's what's up. Here's what's up, guys, is that, look, Apple Intelligence, awesome features, a lot of stuff coming. When it was announced, everyone's like, oh, this looks amazing. This will make me go buy an iPhone. But is it going to cost us money? Ryan, what's going on?
Well, when you think about AI as a whole, it makes sense that everything's going to have to cost money at a certain point.
It costs somebody money.
It's costing somebody money, so eventually that's going to have to pass down to us. But essentially, our buddy Gurman this week, our good friend,
Good friend that we don't know at all.
I'll
but-
manifest
Yeah.
us to have him on this podcast. No, Mark Gurman said this week that Apple is working on Apple Intelligence being free at launch, and then they're going to introduce some sort of Apple Intelligence Plus where you pay for that version of it, and that delivers more features. So most likely that will mean that delivers some of the features they have already told us about, but it's going to be a while that it's going to be free, kind of like what they did with Apple TV Plus. Apple TV Plus was free, I think, for quite a long time for a lot of users, or it was like really easy to get it for free.
It came for free with every Apple thing
Yeah.
you bought. Yeah. It's still, I think, easy to get
It's
free.
yeah, if you get a new thing, but
Yeah.
now it's less so, and it's more of like people are actually buying for this service because it has good shows. So that's probably what they're going to do here. I wouldn't be surprised if we see this absolutely rolled into just an iCloud plan.
Yeah.
But that's the unfortunate thing, is it's a free to start thing that long term is going to be paid. Did you expect this?
Yeah, at some point, right? Well, and what I suspect will be is everything they've already talked about, I think, is going to be free.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like for forever, essentially. Like, here's all these new features, like all this, everything that was in WWDC, I think, are the baseline Apple Intelligence features that will be free. I think what they're going to have is I suspect it'll be rolled into Apple One. So if you're an Apple One subscriber, which I think is up to like $30 a month now. I don't even know what it is. Is that what it is?
Close, I think.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or maybe more.
I pay it.
33?
I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
and it's a thing that gives you every single Apple service: Apple Music, Apple Fitness, iCloud storage, Apple TV, all these kind of things rolled into one.
News.
Apple News. So I think I suspect it'll be rolled into that and give you extra features that you don't have in the paid version that they have not announced yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is not surprising. We've talked about this a lot. It's expensive to run these AI things.
Yeah.
The electricity is going to cost millions and millions of dollars, So I'm not surprised by that. And if you look at Apple as a company, the income they get from services is enormous. And that is what makes the company function. Their whole premise is, we're going to give you amazing, amazing hardware. We're not going to lose money on selling that to you, but we're actually going to make a ton more money on you buying software and services for that hardware.
Yeah.
So Apple Intelligence is just going to be another one of those pillars, right? And I'm sure that's on their roadmap. They're like, oh, what's another service we could sell? And they've already, obviously, Apple Music, and before that, iTunes, a huge thing. Once they invented the Apple Store and taking that, a 30% cut from
The App
everyone.
Store?
Yeah. The App Store, taking the 30% cut from anyone originally, and now 30% for some people, but not all people. Depends on what kind of level you fall into. And then Apple TV, Apple Fitness, all these things that I just mentioned. And then, here's another thing we can throw in there. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all.
Mm-hmm. And they do such a good job with integrating all this stuff that, like, if you need more iCloud storage, your phone's getting full, and you just tap a button to back up all your photos to iCloud, and you don't even really think that now you're paying $10 a month to iCloud, but at least my phone is free of space now, and all this stuff like that. Apple Music as well. I think a lot more people use Apple Music than I realized. I kind of thought everyone was a Spotify person, but a ton of people use Apple Music because it's built into their...
I believe the market share in North America anyway is like 50-50 split and slightly in favor of Apple Music.
Really?
I could be wrong on that.
Yeah.
And I think globally Spotify wins out, but it's still like 60-40 or something like that. So it's Apple Music is incredibly competitive because it comes with every iPhone. Right?
Yeah, it's right there. It's built in. Very easy to use. But on the service side of things, like you're talking about, another way we're going to potentially see Apple expand there is according to Gurman, they're going to be taking a small fee from their partners like ChatGPT when they get signups. So that's not entirely clear of how that's going to work because as it is right now, as it's been demoed, it's like you give a command, your Apple Intelligence cannot handle it. So it asks, can I send this to ChatGPT? And that should be, you don't need to make an account or anything. But I guess maybe there's going to be some sort of integration where you can decide to make an account. And then when you do that, you get a sign up and Apple gets a 30% or whatever.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah, like how would that look? Because the way it's demoed now, it's just kind of in the Apple Intelligence interface, but let you know that it's GPT. Are they gonna have a little, just a little button at the bottom or something? It's not like, oh, get a GPT account to enable more stuff or whatever, and then you get that. Is it going to limit the amount of responses it'll give you, right? Like you can't continue to have a conversation with it unless you sign up. How's that going to look? I imagine it's going to look, I think of the Shazam interface a lot. That's something you bring up a lot. When you actually Shazam a song, it'll tell you the name of it or whatever in the little smart island. But if you click on that, it'll expand to this kind of card that comes up.
Yeah.
And then you can choose to open that song in Apple Music, or you just get that information from the little card, So it's like, oh, like, is that kind of how it's going to look? We're running this kind of pop-up GPT interface that we can move around and do stuff with. And from that, can we sign into an account?
Yeah, maybe, because then at that point, if you'd want to continue doing requests with it and have it remember your information, that's all a question because you want that for the user experience, but Apple is trying to be very secure with this and not have them tracking your information. So are they going to give a choice there? That's kind of a question which I think we'll talk about a little later in this one or maybe in another video. But what is your prediction for how much this is going to cost? I think we already kind of predicted this is going to cost at some point. So once they introduce Apple Intelligence Plus or whatever it's called, how much do you think it's going to be?
$2.99 a month
$2.99
for a standalone.
Okay.
And then it's going to add on $1 a month to Apple One or something at some point. But when it initially launches, it'll just be bundled in with Apple One at whatever the current rate of Apple One is at the time. I don't see them making it prohibitively expensive. Something that this probably compares to is the Satellite SOS feature, which is also a paid feature.
Oh, really?
That Apple has given everyone for free. And they said, hey, you'll have it for free for a year when you buy a phone or whatever. And then beyond that, you're going to have to pay. I don't even know what the rate is on that. But I also don't think it's prohibitive. I think the kind of $3 a month thing is in that impulse range. But the direct comparison I think is the iCloud. If you get standalone iCloud data, the lowest tier I think is $2.99 a month or $1.99 a month maybe. And you get something crazy with that. I want to say you get like 5 terabytes or something or it's something that it's something you're never going to fill up for like super cheap. And I think Apple bets on people paying that much for it, and most users don't use that amount of value for it. The real power users are blowing past that value, but there's not enough of them, and they end up making a profit on it.
I feel like it's not 5 terabytes, but
I probably exaggerated on that
because that seems like a lot.
I think it's at least a terabyte. I think you get for like $2 or something.
Okay,
I'll have to go look. I have Apple One now, so I don't even know what how it breaks out anymore.
But either way, that's definitely very interesting. It will be interesting to see how much it costs. I think $2.99. I was gonna guess $4.99 because it has to be something that you're like, sure.
Sub $5.
Yeah. But 5, maybe 3. We'll see. You're going 3. I'm going 5.
There we go. We'll
Once
lock
it
it
launches,
in. We'll lock it in.
We'll be back here in, I guess, probably a couple years from now.
I don't actually start paying for it. Yeah.
It's not going to be anytime soon because they need to lock people in and get people doing this without making it expensive or an added expense until they deliver something amazing. But in any case, another thing that was really interesting this week is Apple AI, their privacy beta actually already leaked in iOS 16.4, but nobody knew what it was. So at the time when 16.4 came out, there was a new compute module and it was hidden in there. And it was having to do with privacy and all this stuff. And people thought it was just some sort of Raspberry Pi type device that they were experimenting with. And now that we've seen iOS 18 and how they're doing this, it turns out this was them already working on PCC or their private cloud compute.
Yeah, very cool. This is the thing that's going to make people feel better about Apple Intelligence as opposed to Gemini or Meta or Copilot, what anyone else is doing. And because this system is end-to-end encrypted, meaning that it's encrypted when it leaves my phone and stays encrypted until it comes back to me. The Apple makes it so where it's not even technically possible for people to access this information. I was reading some of the things about it. So it's using what's called like stateless processing, so that the system doing the processing in the cloud essentially forgets what it's doing the instant it's done. So it's not like carrying over a process. There's not even anything like in a cache kind of system or something like that. It's instantly just in and out. So that and even if someone, some crack commando team broke into the Apple server farm, it wouldn't matter because even Apple can't access that data. And Apple's already kind of used this as their privacy gold standard for a while, and that they say like, hey, like we can't even get your stuff. You're the only person in the world who can do it. You have to be on your device that is authenticated with your biometrics usually, or your master iCloud password. And if it doesn't have that data is not even, they don't even make it so where it's a rule they can't see it. It's not technically possible.
Yeah.
Which I think is going to be a great thing. This is a great thing. And if we're people like us who I think are proponents of AI and wanting it to do stuff, we have to have this level of privacy for it to be effective. So I love this.
Yeah, me too. Because that's the thing that's going to immediately shut people off from it. We've already seen it when there's some sort of data leak, and people are just like, "No, I will not touch that."
All of the Microsoft recall fiasco.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Even if they figure that out, it's already tainted to a certain degree that people are like, "No, I will not touch that." And it's like, "No, they fixed it. Here's how they did it. Here's how." And you could lay out all the reasons. Still like, "Nah, I don't want to." So Apple's taking that extremely, extremely seriously. That's the word.
That's the word.
For.
Seriously.
But next is a very interesting thing that leads to the idea that this is going to be a slow rollout for iOS, or for Apple Intelligence coming with iOS 18. And the reason is because we've seen leaks this week that they're internally calling these features gray matter. And in code, there is a wait list for gray matter that is being mentioned. So it's mentioned in the beta. And this could mean one of two things. It could mean that the developer beta, once they're pushing Apple Intelligence to developers to try out in the developer beta, will have a waitlist for gray matter, which is these features. Or it could mean the customer beta, which is what they're going to call these features when it comes, will have a waitlist, which would be pretty crazy. If you get your iPhone 16 Pro at launch, maybe they'll have a priority system, but you get your iPhone 16 Pro excited about Apple Intelligence, you open it up and you click join waitlist and wait.
I got bad news for you then, man, because I feel like I don't know if it'll be like the join the waitlist system like that, but we already have talked about this in depth in that a lot of those, nearly all the big marquee features are not going to be ready at iPhone launch.
Yeah.
And they're talking about some of these not until 2025. It makes sense that they're going to need some way to control entry people into these things just because they don't have literally the hardware built to handle it yet. So I think if Apple continually calls it a preview, right, and they're really smart on that branding, I don't think it's crazy that there's going to be a waitlist thing. It seems to me to be better to not release it at all if you're going to have the waitlist, though, from a marketing point of view.
Yeah.
And just say like, hey, like these features are coming. They're in limited release right now, but we're going to get everyone's wide rollout at some date, blah, blah, blah. Because the second there's a wait list, it's reminding people of it, right? But if you just tell everyone from the beginning, hey, you're not going to get this until February. Okay, cool. And now I'm not like constantly like checking my queue in the wait list.
Yeah. I'm so fascinated by this because it mentions join the gray matter waiting list, joined wait list, and then while gray matter is in limited preview, you may experience unusually slow responses when not in a supported region. So there's a lot of stuff there that this could be just on the developer side, but it seems like this might be some of the experience of what these features are going to be. And maybe it's only if you have a older generation phone, which at this point is only the iPhone 15 Pro, I think, that will be able to run any of this. But yeah, that doesn't seem like the smoothest Apple rollout, but they have to get this going and figure something out. But ultimately, it's always that balance of security with feature delivery. And the thing about AI is that these features get better by being trained. And so Apple is so focused on security that we know that they're specifically saying that they are not training their AI with our personal data. They're using licensed data to train this. So in theory, these features aren't going to be directly getting better as a result of us directly using them, I believe. And is that going to put them behind? Because then they're competing with someone like ChatGPT, who's even going to be integrated, and they absolutely train on user data. And I think customers probably know that, but might not fully know the difference. So is this something that might put Apple ahead because people are like, it's fine that it's worse because I'm secure? Or is it going to put them behind because people don't care and they're behind ChatGPT?
Yeah, I get. Here's where I would come. I don't know if it's necessarily a true thing to say that it will be worse if it's not trained on user stuff, because you can still train on a lot of things that aren't your own users. There's plenty of data and information out there, and so I don't think that's. I don't think it's the case that their model will be worse because it's not trained on users. Necessarily the case. That could happen, right? And the way to stop that from happening is Apple pays for a lot of data from other people to train this stuff, right? So if they're actually out there actively training their model, I would also say there's also the flip of this is that things can get worse if trained by the users, because users are very stupid, and you're also going to have the problem of people using it in weird ways that it's not even designed to use and that you don't want it to learn from. So I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing that it's not being trained on users. In fact, I would argue overall, I think it's a net positive for Apple and for users to say like, oh, like this thing is not learning from what I'm doing right now. And to be clear, when we say not trained on it, it means it's not using your languaging and how you're talking to it to understand how to better communicate in the future. But it is going to remember things about you, your address, your name, whatever, things that are going to be helpful for an AI to know.
Yeah.
But that's just not part of its training model. That's just part of its kind of memory system, which is a separate way to think about it. So, I guess we'll have to see. This is one of the things we're not even really going to know for another 10 years. Like how long is it going to take before Apple falls behind on their LLM training because they're not training on users? Maybe never,
Yeah, and if we see them falling behind, we might see them add some feature where you can opt in to that kind of training, and it'll clearly explain. It would probably be the equivalent of like when they added the Ask App Not to track, and then Facebook would tell you why you want it to track.
I imagine it's going to look exactly like that.
Yeah.
I suspect that is going to be enabled in iOS soon for all these AI models. It's going, oh, you're acknowledging that the system is training on what you're doing, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And they're at least very clear about it. And instead of you opting out after you have already been doing it, you'll have to opt directly in. I think that's a big difference that Apple would be very clear about. But all of these Apple Intelligence features are coming, and voice is a big part of all of this. And so we've expected this would probably come to their home devices. And we've been talking for the longest time about Siri Pro coming to the HomePod. Can't wait to have a better integration into our homes. And now the rumors are it's coming to Apple Vision, but not the HomePod, which disappointing, but I can also kind of understand why this is the case. What do you think?
I'm quitting the podcast. I'm quitting the podcast. This is so sad, but so obvious.
Yeah.
It's so obvious now that when you really think about it, because the HomePods have no real tech in them that can handle this, right?
Yeah.
They don't have the processors, right? If Apple's already saying you need an A17 or an M1 to run this, not in a HomePod. Do you need 8 gigs of RAM? Not a HomePod.
Yeah.
So this is so brutally honest or obvious that I don't see how we didn't. This should have occurred to us at some point. I guess we were thinking about. One, it's still technically feasible to just do it all off device, but that's not something Apple wants to do, right? Like, if there's a reason that Google Home and Alexas and all this are going to have full-featured LLMs, it's because they're not happening on device; they're sending it all to the cloud.
Yeah.
So if Apple wants on-device stuff, it cannot happen on these current devices. There's some workarounds they could do, right? Where it actually is doing the processing on your phone and then sends it back to the HomePod and all this kind of stuff. The direct quote from the article about this is, HomePods don't have enough of a footprint as a product to make this make any sense for us to invest in making this work. It's like, oh, like not enough people have them, and millions of people have HomePods. But you know, the scale that Apple deals with,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, this is a niche thing for us. Like, I'm not worried about it. I think what this does, though, here's where I'm back in. Here's where I'm back into the podcast. So I'm excited now.
Great.
Is yeah, good. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Yeah, I'll still show up and shoot these with you. I think it means there's going to be a new HomePod device.
Yeah.
There's got to be, right? Because it's crazy not to have these kind of AI systems built into a smart home thing. I don't think Apple really wants to completely cede that space to someone else. So I think we're going to get a new HomePod. Maybe it's this HomePod with a screen thing. But either way, I think it's going to be in HomePods. It's just not going to work in my 7-year-old HomePod I've got now.
Hear me out.
I'm
It's gonna have to be more expensive.
Yep.
So right now, if you're a crazy person like us,
Yeah.
you have multiple HomePods.
Yeah.
Maybe even more than a human should have. And
With the 2 is the maximum number a human should have.
Yeah, so we definitely exceed that.
we're stupid. Yeah.
But for that scenario, it would be ridiculous to have to replace every single one. So maybe there's like your HomePod hub main one that's like the one with the screen,
And it works
and then
as
all
like
the
a
rest
relay.
of them bounce to that.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
That would make something like that would make sense. But again, I don't know if Apple's even like they're like
Yeah,
does they
they're-
even care? Like and then the big question is does this sell one more HomePod for us? And the answer is maybe no. Like upgrading the old ones, and I
Yeah.
mean, and if they're willing to draw a hard line in the sand on iPhone, one of the most popular products in the world, I think they're more than willing to go. Sorry, old HomePod guys.
Yeah.
'Cause I still use a Gen 1 HomePod. I have
Which
one
they
of-
just labeled as vintage.
yeah, so like I have one of the original HomePods, and yeah, it still works fine.
Yeah, I'm
Takes
sure.
Siri commands, plays music, does great. And then I have one of the newer, bigger HomePods. I have a Gen 2 HomePod or something. It looks like the original design, but wasn't the
Yeah,
original.
I have one of those. Yeah.
And then I have 2 minis. So I have 5 HomePods.
I'm not going to say how many I have.
Yeah, you got more than me, man. Like, cause you're running the studio has one. Yeah,
There's 2 in this room.
Yeah, there's 2. You have 2 in one room. At least I don't have that. At least mine are in
Yeah.
separate rooms. But those might all be just some music playing bricks now, buddy.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a couple years until they introduce that, but they would have to introduce something because it's going to get to the point where you're using your Siri on your phone and it's incredible. And then you use your HomePod and it's just like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this thing is so slow and annoying and doesn't understand anything. So that is disappointing, but it makes sense they're bringing it to the Vision Pro. That absolutely makes sense to have Apple Intelligence features on that device at that price point, and it has all the necessary hardware and processors to get that done.
So yeah, a lot of stuff still up in the air with Apple Intelligence. I suspect we'll be up in the air for at least 2 more years before we know really how they're going to monetize this, all the features that are going to be out. And tragically, I feel like we're not going to be able to use it on those HomePods, but they will probably release some kind of new super cool AI HomePod that we will buy 5 of those.
Yeah.